It's 4:30. I don't actually have any slides for this, I'll say right off, because I want it to be a Q&A. Hopefully things work out. I'll introduce who's here. My name is Phil Race. I work in the 2D team. This is Meet the AWT Swing and 2D teams. One of the catches for us is that actually most of them are in St. Petersburg, and we don't mean the one in Florida. So we have some representatives here of these teams who have touched on some of these areas, and we'll try to answer things as best as we can. Here I have Scott Kovac, who is who actually worked for a couple of companies of interest before he came here, but he was working on SWT and things like that. But he's now the lead for our Mac OS JDK on Mac OS efforts, which has actually been a big thing for us over the last year and a bit. And Alexei Semenuk, who works on Swing and JavaFX interoperability. As I'm sure you all understand, JavaFX is where we're putting an awful lot of development, but also Swing and AWT and the existing stack are where people have an awful lot of investment. So I'll just start by sort of saying a few things, just sort of help us remember what's been going on recently. In JDK 7, right, we shipped it last year. We didn't really have a whole lot of updates. What we're basically trying to do with the main stack is maintain it, update it for new platforms. And I think pretty much the same thing is going to happen around for JDK 8. So JDK 8 will bundle the FX stack. Right? In fact, this JDK 7 is already bundling the FX stack, and eventually it'll become more tightly integrated with that stack. But Swing is not going anywhere. It's there, right? But the hope is that eventually, over time, people will migrate in using the interop capabilities between Swing and FX to help get them there. But we're not going to let it wither in the sense of the existing stack will continue to be supported, and as new operating system platforms come along, like Windows 8 was coming in this month, actually, I think. We will be working to add necessary support for Windows 8 into the stack. And I think that something like 7 update 12 and probably, we've got some replanning going on, but a release early next year will probably officially support Windows 8. And then, there'll be the usual kind of thing for JDK 8 will also support it. Mac OS, as I touched on, has actually been a pretty significant effort for us. Apple, we'd been working with Apple for quite a while, trying to get them to contribute their code over years. Things have been quietly going on. Eventually it came to a head where we had to officially start to be for JDK 7, Apple were not going to provide a JDK 7, so we had to take that up. And we worked very closely with Apple, and there were a lot of different areas across the JDK that had to be updated, but definitely AWT and Java 2D were the two areas that really took a significant brunt of the work there. That's in I think 7 update 4 we officially had support for desktop applications, and then 7 update 6 added additional support for applications running as applets in the browser. And I would like to say that work is 100% complete. We're pretty much at parity. There's some subtle things. I think they're only just getting fixed around. What was the last? There was at least one. What was the thing that we missed? There was at least one parity feature that was missing. I've forgotten what it was now. Sorry. Something in drag and drop. I thought it might have been something in drag and drop that wasn't working properly. But all that will get there. There is still certainly a significant number of outstanding bugs in the platform, and the quality isn't yet where it is. We've had to learn a few things about, the way we'd always had to do this. We're now taking the pain that Apple took, where they kind of have a different model for that platform, and the things that we'd done for Windows and Linux and other kind of Unixes like Solaris, didn't necessarily fit the Apple model. So we'll get there with the quality there too. So with that, I'd like to actually just sort of ask if you guys have, I want to open up, it's Meet the Teams. I know you're coming into it pretty cold. We'll try and warm you up as best we can, but I want to find out what's concerning you, what questions you have, and we'll try to answer them. So if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I'd like to get mouse events working in applets on Safari, because they don't work at all.
Scott, do you have any idea of how bad that is?
Let's see. Mouse events are, it's a pain because we've got this two-process system. We basically rely on Safari to send us an event when you go into the. So okay, let's be specific, because if a mouse event as you move into the applet area, is that what you're talking about, or?
You can't get. I can't remember which one it is. It's clicks, I think. You can't get clicks or moves. I don't remember which one. They're not working over the applet. We have basically worked around this problem in a horrible way by creating a window which we put over top of the applet, that when you mouse into the applet, it's moved from being off screen to being over top.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you move off screen, we paint the current state of the thing as a background on the applet, so that, I mean, it's horrible.
Wow.
Yeah, and because it literally, I don't remember if it's moves or if it's clicks, but one of the major mouse events just does not work inside the applet.
Wow. Okay.
And in Safari, in Firefox, it looks fine. So I think it's a Safari integration issue. The Apple folks for a while said that it was had to do with the way that the was it the
NP API?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The NP API was working, or well, really not working for them.
Right.
So now that you guys own it, what's going on with it?
Well, the NP API is owned by the browser, right? Isn't it?
Right. So, yeah, because.
Okay, so we're going to be stuck in the middle again.
Well, okay. So the browser serializes an event, sends it into the plugin, which we then dispatch off to you, the client.
Right.
So it should go mouse down, mouse clicked, mouse up. The best thing I can say is, if you got a simple sample, we can turn it into a bug, and because that specific part is what I work on, okay. is sending events from the browser to the client. But
so is it over? This must work over like a text field that you put in your applet. Is it over specific parts of the applet, just the applet background you're trying to get to click?
No, I don't think it works over anything. We couldn't get it to work at all.
Oh, okay. So this might have something to do with the focus of. Okay, yeah. I've worked with Dimitri Sherpanov on
Dimitri,
this.
yep.
Yeah. So there's something going on with the focus of the applet, because we have to fake a window, basically, with an applet.
Right.
And what tends to happen is that the applet. The browser window becomes active, but the applet doesn't realize that it's now active as well.
Okay.
So an event should go. Oh, sorry.
You want to take it?
No. So the event should go to the applet window, but the applet window doesn't think it's active, so it doesn't take it. So.
Is there a way with Live Connect I can force that window to think it's active?
See now.
Around this problem, so that I don't have to have like a window over the applet.
Yeah, that shouldn't be necessary.
You see what I'm saying?
Can we work around it in some way?
Can I pump a focus event on the event queue to get that?
It's worth a shot.
Okay.
It's worth a shot. Because that's roughly where that's basically where the problem is getting the applet host the window hosting the applet to think that it's active.
Okay. All right. JavaScript. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's what I mean with Live Connect. So I mean, mean, all right, I'll try that. I'm still getting it.
Okay.
But are we going to be able to fix that ourselves?
Yeah, it's a bug in the plugin basically.
Okay. Okay.
And actually, it's more specifically like C embedded window or one of those things.
Yeah. So one of the things that changed is we had to go to, well, the old in process plugin basically was dying, and we had to go to the out of process plugin model. So the plugin is, and the whole plugin is completely new for us in JDK 7 on Apple. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, we had to rewrite like almost the entire graphics rendering stack. So there's been a thing called the OpenGL pipeline languishing in JDK since maybe 1.5 and evolving, but never turned on. But and because generally speaking, drivers weren't stable enough here and there, and in FX we have the same sort of problem that when we try to use OpenGL, often, particularly on Linux, drivers aren't stable. But it came to Mac, and really this is now the default pipeline. This is really the only pipeline we have. So we're using OpenGL rendering throughout, and and we have to go to this. And there are also these things where we have to use these sort of exported Apple interfaces specifically for the use of the JVM, in order, because not some of the things that we need to do to correctly render Aqua and other things are not exposed by standard Apple APIs. So the whole thing is, it's a massive change from JDK 6, and it's massively different than our own code base for Windows. So the whole thing is, that's what it's kind of getting at. If there are some pains here at this point, we'll get to them. But people will sign off and say, good, it's shipping. But in our heart of hearts, we know that it's not at the same level yet that we've managed to get to on Windows, tuning and fine-tuning that stack. This is just, one is 10 years old and robust, the other is brand new. Yeah.
I'm interested in your testing methodology. How do you make sure that you're drawing a specific character at a specific location for the font without looking at it visually?
Ooh.
Same gradients, with all the different permutations you can have, like you can discount and off, fractional metrics on and off, and all that other stuff. Is there an automated test suite that you have for that?
And free and available on the web. And I don't think I have a terrific answer there. I think that what mostly happens is for this kind of thing is that SQ we write, there's a couple of, they write tests, right, which create golden images, right? Those images then get essentially verified, right? Now there's a couple of different ways you can then do the rest of it. One of which is that they then they store that image, and then they come back and they run some later build or release, and they want to compare the two images, right? And the other approach is that they basically, once they've said once they captured the image the first time, they don't necessarily capture the image, right? What they do is they remember that build worked, right? And they would run that build and the new build on a system today, the latest build, and say, do the two generate the same image in this environment? I actually like that one a bit better because you don't have to have so much storage, and because it's sort of less, it's less vulnerable to things like where, supposing you were running on Apple's 10, take Windows, let's go to Windows. Say the font that something API reports on XP is to Homer and reports Sego UI on Windows 7, right? And we call that API. If they'd stored a golden image which was baking into Homer and go to run it on 7, they'll go, you've broken it, it's different. Well, no, it's just that, so, but that's the best I think that we do in terms of anything that's automation for this. with regard, otherwise knowing exactly where the pixels are going to go for a particular font, even if you know where where the image is going to get, the bounding box area, where within that bounding box the particular pixels are touched, is very hard. And then, if you're, depending on whether you're using black and white or grayscale or subpixel rendering, they look different. That's a real tricky one. So if you don't know, any test like that has got to be one that's to have even a chance, it's got to be something that's really specific, where you're nailing down the rendering characteristics. You nail down, I think I'm going to use Tahoma, and you check that it was Tahoma before you assume that something else went wrong. I'm going to use 14 pixels. You don't kind of call some API to give me the default font, and you check that it was Tahoma in case they took Tahoma off Windows 8, which I don't think they do, but and you carefully control the environment, and I would draw it to like the safest thing possible, buffered image or something, and then you could do something like, one thing that might work is you could try to get the bounds. You could ask for the visual bounds or the pixel bounds, right? And ensure that they were, and then you could, within the pixel bounds, you could then compare the images, I suppose, and pixel for pixel. Yeah, that might help a little bit, but yeah. Are the tests. So the SQE tests that do that kind of thing are in some SQE test suite, which I don't even know where it is. Well, I say that, but it means every time they send something, I have to go find it. But so OpenJDK, we have a lot of our standard regression tests, and that are in the open, but there's a bunch that are in closed, and we try to move things from closed to open when we can. But the test harness to run those is also available somewhere on the web. You can get the test harness, but not the SQE tests are a different kettle of fish. They aren't available. But the regression tests, there are a fair number of them that are automated, and they don't do precisely that, but they will handle precisely that case. But there are a bunch of them where we basically draw stuff into an image, and then we go look at the image and try to figure out if it's what we expected. So it's just create an off-screen software buffered image and do it that way. Yeah. I don't think, well, I mean, modulo, there was one or two components that got added in JDK 7, but I don't know of any new swing features that are proposed for JDK 8 offhand. So pretty much you can expect it to be a trickle. There might be some specific things, but you generally got the right idea that the investment and the effort and the future is basic direction is JavaFX, and and Swing will be updated as necessary to continue to work at least as well as it does today. But in terms of some new features like supporting gestures or directly, or adding some big new Swing component, those things are much less likely without a really compelling case. Yeah, so. Well, I mean, I'm not the marketing guy, but yeah, that's what they are preaching. Yes, but there are migration paths, right? So there's, whether you're using SWT or Swing, there are ways to actually embed FX in these applications. We ship that capability with FX. There's a JFX panel which you can use to basically embed FX in a Swing application. So I mean, I think everybody understands that Swing's been around for 12, 14 years, maybe 15, yeah, 15 years or something. And so that there's been a lot of investment and adoption of it, and big companies like Oracle are in the business of offering support for things for a long time. So, and it's part of the standard platform. It's not suddenly going to be taken out. We've never done that, anything like that. So you needn't worry about the investment in that. But if you're creating, definitely if you're trying to write something new, you should be looking at FX at this point. Not least because it's got a lot of the capabilities that Swing was never really going to be able to deliver. And if you just go look at something like if you go to the download site for FX, you could download separately. There's a separate download bundle for samples, and you can just run through those and see all the capabilities. But you can play back, H.264 media. There's an embedded web browser. There's some more components than Swing had. There's support for animation and transitions and all sorts of flashy effects that are just designed in. So you don't really need to sort of figure out how to graft that on afterwards in a non-natural way.
When you say migrating to JavaFX, you're not talking about migrating existing Swing applications to JavaFX. That's not something that can be done without reasonable effort.
Well, I don't know that there's a simple translate between the APIs because there's code. I mean, I think when we migrated from script to Java for FX, we were able to basically translate a lot of the stuff because the whole model was the same. But I don't know. I'm not aware of any tools that actually help you, automatically translate from one to the other. Which isn't to say somebody couldn't come out with a nice, expensive product which would get you enough of the way there that it might be worth buying it, depending on how much investment you've got. But I think that that probably it's one of these things where you would sit down and reimagine, as they say, your user interface, because you might go, wow, I can do a lot of really cool things. And because FX is generally speaking graphics accelerated by Direct3D or OpenGL, we can do a lot of things that are that look expensive, but are actually not really adding any. It may be less load on your CPU than a Swing app in some ways. If you're doing that, which isn't to say we don't use D3D in JDK as well, and OpenGL and so forth on Mac in particular. But we can run quite nice looking JavaFX UIs. If you go to the demo grounds, there's a couple of little demos of it running on tiny little embedded boards, and some of the kiosks that you see outside, that's running on an embedded SE with the FX stack on top. So if you can do that on a little embedded 800 megahertz ARM or something, I think actually maybe the 1.6 on those big kiosks driving the big screen, right? Then you should be able to create a really compelling UI which uses all of these transitions and features, and those makes your app look a lot more modern. The guy with the beard was first. System tree, did you say?
Tree.
System tray. Oh. I don't know what the specific, any specific intention around the system tray, but what? Yeah. Okay. Right. I don't know if I have a comprehensive answer to that, except to say that providing where there's some native functionality that makes sense, like the Apple menu bar and so forth. We want to make the applications look sort of native and behave natively. I mean, we added all that tray support to SE, like around about JDK 6 or something, and I think it makes sense that we would add as much as we can in as many we can sensible ways to FX. So when we have things like file dialogues and eventually print dialogues, I think we expect that we'll show you the native one, right? So it's an interesting thing. We've got all this sort of stuff that's completely cross-platform. I can cross-platform controls that and all the rest of it. But some of those touch points on the windowing system and integration with the desktop, I think that they will surface. I don't know. I mean, something like the system tray we managed to do quite adequately in JDK. So I imagine that one would certainly be one that will be added. But providing access to things that make you seem like you're running on an enterprise native desktop kind of application, is one of the goals. So I just don't know about specific plans for specific features.
Let me.
Take that.
So when I worked on the SWT, this is one of the philosophies that I try to push there, which basically says, like, up till now anyway, AWT's philosophy is take the union of, or take the intersection of all these interfaces, and that's what we should provide. And my philosophy is no, that's actually the worst thing you can do. You should provide the union of all these features. And if there's something that only makes sense on the Mac, well, write an API that basically does the right smart thing on a non-Mac platform. And likewise for Windows and Linux. I don't know what those are, but that's something I've been trying to push with Richard Baer for for FX, particularly in the menus. Because I think we came up with a pretty clever system for doing it in the SWT for handling the system menu, for example, on a Mac. There's no reason we can't do that in FX as well. So this is one of those things where, as Phil mentioned, FX tends to be focused on, any of these cross-platform toolkits tends to be focused on what's inside the bounds of a window. And hopefully, now that I'm here, I can actually try to get some interest in let's try to actually make applications instead of pretty windows, because otherwise at a certain point, if you don't do those sort of things, I think you're wasting your time in cross-platform development. You should just stop and adopt learn how to program on the platform you're on, because otherwise what's the point? So that's my opinion.
I mean, there was something of a reset in the goals of FX between FX1 and FX2. It was originally sort of targeted more as being, for the web and for some sense like a Flash kind of competitor. And I think the 2.0 version, which isn't a scripting language, which is based on Java, we want to be able to do enterprise desktop applications that as well, or primarily even, I think that. But even though we're also now going back and down into mobile and embedded and all the rest of it. Yeah. So. So my understanding, right, is that running in desktop mode. So for, I guess most of everybody here knows what Windows 8 looks like when you boot it up. No? Okay. Well, if you've seen Windows 7 Phone, it looks like that. It's a bunch of square tiles on a green background, and so to get to the start menu that everybody got so used to is gone. And so they're like becoming third-party add-ons to recreate a start menu, and there's all the noise on the web. Well, these, Microsoft got it all wrong, and then someone, well, no, you just don't understand what they're doing. Oh, okay. But it's a very, very radical change in the UI, which I guess people will eventually get adapted to, or Microsoft will take feedback and adapt. But to get to what looks like a traditional Windows desktop, you have to, it doesn't boot up into that. Applications that need it will go into that mode. And in that mode, the mode you boot up into is called Metro, or now they call it Windows UI, because some German company was threatening to sue them or something. Sorry? Modern UI, thank you. Yes, that's it, yeah. So the Metro mode, as it's still known by most people, I think FX will be updated to support that, but I don't think JDK 8 will be updated to operate in Metro mode. Now, quite what that means, it will not be a Metro app. When you try to start it from that mode, Windows, just like any app, will flip you into the desktop mode. But once you get into the desktop mode, I understand that we will basically have essentially an update to the look and feel, so it looks like a native app. But I'm not 100% sure on that. So I think during JDK 7, we were there was a plan to add touch and gesture support to the JDK, but that was dropped even in JDK 7. So the chances of it coming back in JDK 8 are pretty low. It's not on any plan. So I mean that's part of the rationale for this is basically that we need to sort of put some things behind us and put the investment in the future, and those things are need to be maintained, but it doesn't necessarily need to be where we put the major new investment that's going into FX. That's the direction that has basically been set. But Swing, as it is Swing, will be updated to work in Windows 8 desktop mode. But I think that you'll see. I don't know what the adoption of Windows 8 will be like, because you'll see a lot of applications that have essentially the same issue. He asked, yeah, the question. How long do I expect Swing to be maintained for? Should we expect what on OS X? Mac OS X menu? Let's see. The application menu? Okay. Probably not going to see it in Swing or AWT. I know it would be more likely to see that in FX.
Can you answer his first question, because then I have a follow-up to that question.
Okay.
The first question was, how long are you maintaining
Swing?
Swing.
As far as I know, forever. I mean, as long as, for the definition of forever, that is,
Okay. All right. So my follow-up to that is, what of the Apple client properties are still being supported in the Oracle version of the Mac OS X look and feel? Because that's how you got your stuff integrated with the menu bar, and you got small size buttons and
yeah, right. So that's right when you
stuff and
for client property. That's what I think of, like button size and things like that.
yeah, because there was what apple.laugh.menu bar or system menu bar or something like that. You integrated with the top menu.
Oh, you use screen menu.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So are you still supporting that?
That should be there. Okay. That particular one should be there. Now, for client properties, I honestly don't know what's going on there, and I should, because there's no reason not to support them. One. So I guess that's the answer. It's like I don't. I don't have an answer of where they are, what's going on with them, but there's no reason we shouldn't be supporting them. So I don't have a better answer than that.
You know, I thought in general we were supporting all Apple extensions and the like, unless there was some.
Yeah, well, there's like the EAWT and the EIO. That was brought over, and that's all supported. Okay. But well, okay, that's a different thing. But I was going to say that don't expect to see those APIs in that same form in FX. But yeah. They did pull over from Apple for AWT and Swing. But yeah, but as far as client properties goes, I don't know.
If the code to read them is there and the code to act on them is there, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah. I'm trying to think of a way to get feedback into the system that says, you know, we need to produce a list of these things and say, yes, we are going to support this, or no, we aren't.
There's a technical document that Apple produced for
yes.
1.5 release that lists all of them.
Right. But I don't know who to take that to. But
well, we could just go find it and then hand it off to SQE and ask them to see if anything actually works first. So you tried this and it didn't work?
Oh, I haven't, but that was just...
Oh, okay.
I don't know about his question, but I just wanted to find out about everything else then.
Yeah.
We're using some of that, you know, for the back...
You're not the first person... Yeah.
6 still, so I mean...
You're not the first person to ask me that this week, and I'm aware of the problem.
I think it's just a high-level thing, is we're trying to sort of, you know, make it so you can migrate from Apple JDK 6 to our JDK 7 without, you know, lots of things not working.
Sure, yeah. That's what I'm hoping for, too.
Yeah.
But in other words, if something should not work, you should find a bug.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No problem with that.
I think at one point I said that if you find something that worked in 6 but is not working in 7, assume incompetence or ignorance. Don't assume that somebody deliberately said. Don't assume somebody said, "Oh no, we're not supporting that." So if you see something missing, let us know.
But if we're incompetent and ignorant, there's no point reporting it anyway. So. There was that guy.
Right. Mike Swingler gave us some information or hints as to how to do a better job with high DPI. Unfortunately, it is not. Some work needs to be done, and some folks in St. Petersburg really need to get a high DPI system that they can do the implementation on. But I know that we're aware of the problem. I can't give you a time or a timetable for when we can fix it. It would probably be an 8 at this point if it did happen.
Yeah. What was the question? What did he say?
We are planning to support it.
Oh, I would assume so.
I would assume yes. Yes.
I mean, you know, that's basically going to be the way that all the Apple displays are going to go eventually, I think. Yeah. So what else can you do? But right now, there's only the latest MacBook Pro. And does anybody here have one even? Has anybody got one yet?
Yep. Ken.
Who? Oh, Ken Chen?
Yeah.
Oh, what is it, its own?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we don't have one yet. We just got, I got a new MacBook like about a couple of months before they shipped the Retina ones. And so, well, I'm out of luck, you know. I'm sorry?
You want to see a screenshot of the difference? How it should look like?
Do you already know how bad it looks? I have no idea.
I've had people explain it to me. But if you've got one handy, I'll take a look. But
yeah. Okay. Well, you could actually feel free to send in the images and we can attach them to the bug report to get the priority upgraded, but yeah. But, or you could just tell Apple you're not going to buy a new MacBook until they make it easier to, anyway, no, that'll work, yeah. Okay, this guy. Let's see.
Well, from the performance point of view, here are two cases. The first is FPS rate. So for embedded FX content, the degradation is, but it's not that big. So it's about 10 or 15%. And the CPU load is really high. So, well, this is the price that you have to graphical toolkits, Swing and FX running in the same application. So this results into some extensive CPU usage. As for the pitfalls, I think that I don't remember any specific bug reports saying that when used in embedded mode, it rendered something wrong in the wrong way. So, hope answer your questions.
Yeah, okay. Let's see.
We've noticed differences between OpenJDK and the official Oracle JDK when it comes to rendering, especially with the fonts, there's space between characters and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And also with some third-party libraries like JDK Graph, it'll fill in like a wedge or a pie, but the fill will actually be outside of the edge of the pie. What differences happen between
The fill for a pie chart, you mean?
like a wedge for a
Yeah,
pie or
okay.
a bar chart? Things will just be like a little off. You guys actually change the rendering pipeline with those?
There's a few differences. So there are a number of significant differences between OpenJDK and Oracle JDK because we had licensed third-party code over time. Actually, not really over time. It was all licensed back in like 1997, okay? And it got baked in over time. There's some proprietary fonts we licensed from a company called Bigelow and Holmes, which is one thing. But with regard to the rendering that I can think of off the top of my head, and I think there's a couple of other things, but there was a color management system. That's not relevant to what you're talking about here. But there's a good chance that in JDK 8, we will throw away the proprietary one and replace it with the open one, which is called Little CMS. That hasn't been committed yet, but it's something I've been trying to push for us to get done. So that will knock down one difference. The other two are that with regard to like the PyFill, Oracle JDK had used this library called Ductus, which is a software rasterizer. It's very high performing, certainly for the time, and it still holds up well today. But Jim isn't here. He snuck in and then he snuck out again. He's there you go. But this got replaced with a library that had been developed for use on mostly by ME called Pisces, then there was like a Java version and a native version. Aside from the fact that it was quite slow compared to Ductus, such that some demos could run many times slower, it also did have quite a number of bugs, deviations from what, were not just our expected behavior, but our standardized behavior, right? And there was actually quite a useful set of exchanges between Jim and some guy who was working at the time for Red Hat, who basically I think spent some months trying to fix up and improve the performance and the correctness of Pisces. So I don't know what we will do there, but we're actually using Pisces in FX, right? And that may well also be a good candidate at some point to, well, I think the conversation occasionally comes up, can we, get rid of ductus, right? So that might happen, but the main, the kind of thing that you're seeing may have been fixed in JDK 8. I don't know that any of the fixes from Dennis Lyler at Red Hat made it into a 7 update. I do not remember, but you may want to sort of just run it on a JDK 8 build that you can get from what's it called? I forget, the Java.net anyway, and just see if it's any better. But we're looking at not just the correctness, but also looking at the performance, and I think on most things it's getting significantly closer. The final one you're getting at is that we use a internal font rasterizer, a proprietary font rasterizer that we licensed a long time ago called T2K in the Oracle JDK, and OpenJDK uses FreeType, which is used by a lot of open source projects. There really wasn't an alternative for providing a free open source rasterizer in the OpenJDK. I mean, that's FreeType's basically all there is out there. And applications have historically been, well, application writers, companies, whatever, have been historically really, really, really hard on us when text rendering changes or metrics changes, because they lay out their applications to the pixel, and there was one senior fellow back at Sun who always used to scowl at us when about one particular incompatibility that we'd introduced that got some feedback from a large company where we'd actually fixed a correctness bug, but it broke their application. And also, although it expired around about the same time, we were using hinting, and there were some licenses around and patents around hinting for fonts, which we couldn't we couldn't actually use that capability when we used FreeType. So we're still using in the Oracle JDK this thing called T2K, and FreeType in the OpenJDK. That one is going to be the sort of most problematic one, which will require a lot of careful examination as to where we flip over. But so there's going to be a strong likelihood of differences between the two. In the thing is that on in basic black and white rendering mode, there's probably the case where you get fewest differences, because it's pretty well defined as to how everything should work. But unfortunately, that's the mode that nobody cares about anymore. So yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised to see differences. But if you see things that are, so obvious as to be like, well, this has got to be a bug, right? Then you can go and complain. But sometimes it can be literally just, hinting is one of the things. We will generally hint FreeType. It depends whether it's been built with the flag to do the hinting. The distros generally defer to the FreeType that they installed on their system, and they may well, it can be affected by configuration options on the user's desktop, and some of that can be may account for the differences. And sometimes we've actually right now, I think we do a better job of trying to use the very specific font that in the swing look and feels that you would use in a native desktop application, but that wouldn't explain differences between the two rasterizers there. So if you see something that looks really bad, I couldn't tell you just offhand whether it's like a JDK was not doing it right, T2K is not doing it right, or FreeType. But if you see something that's bad and you just want to file a small test case as a bug saying difference, we can then examine that. Sorry? You could fix it too. It's if you want to fix it, I'm all for that. Yeah. The trouble with the closed source, of course, is that you can't fix that. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, one over here.
You touched on this earlier, but a question specifically about the file dialog. If there's any plans going forward, especially on Macintosh, now that we have sandbox environments, one thing that we're forced to do is use the very old Java hot file dialog if we want to select files. And people talk about JavaFX being a new way to talk about any plans there might be to have other solutions for file dialog that support sandboxing.
So the problem, well, I guess the problem, it is a problem. So when you're sandboxed in OS X, you get a completely new implementation of the native file chooser when it's used in the sandbox mode. And there is no way to simulate that in Java, unfortunately. And the reason you have to do this is because it's this special implementation of the file dialog that allows the user to pick something not in the container. And I don't know that it would be possible for JFileChooser, for example, to replicate that, because JFileChooser basically fails because it tries to get a list of files and tries to display it. That's just not going to work. What we have heard so far is that people want to be able to put like an accessory view almost on the native file dialog. That, generally speaking, Apple frowns on in general, even in native code. But it's something we'd have to think up a new API for, because I don't think there's really any provision right now in any of the current either JFileChooser or FX to have something like that. I have to take a look and see if that is possible. But no, that's good feedback, though. I know that I've also heard that from others. It's like they want to use, they want the file chooser functionality, but they want to be able to hang a custom component on the side, or maybe like a preview kind of thing or something like that. But yeah, it's good feedback. We can look into it. I can't make any promises though right now. So it's something I probably end up having to take back to Apple, basically saying, is there some way we can do this? So. No, because it's a completely separate model. The native sandboxing and Java sandboxing, quote unquote, it's the same word used, but for a completely different implementation.
So it's like, I think our sandboxing, we're saying we don't trust the application, and Apple's saying we don't trust Java.
Yeah, well, we don't trust something that was downloaded from the web.
Yeah, whatever it was. Yeah. Okay. Any last questions? I'm not sure. I think we're close to the end. If
yeah,
not,
it's 5:25.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for the questions. I hope it was useful.